r/TalesFromYourServer, episode 37. Man calls for his server. For some backstory, I was working as a server in a movie restaurant bar hybrid, think movie tavern is the correct term, as a server. Each server was to collect orders from the tables in the theater, put them in the system, and run them to the tables, all during the movie. Guests would communicate their orders by writing it down on pieces of paper and putting them up in the railings on the table so that we could see them. Sometimes, servers would wind up being in multiple theaters, either by choice, to make more money that night, or lack of staff to serve a movie. More often it was more tickets being sold than expected, but occasionally someone wouldn't be able to make it to work. I was working in only one theater that night, but the other 3 theaters near me were all worked by one server who had took them. Because they hadn't sold that well to start, but one ended up selling quite a few tickets at the last minute. I was helping throughout the movie with running food and drinks when I had a spare moment away from my own theater. It had sold well, but it wasn't too busy for me to not help. The movie ended, and most people had left the theater, except one man. As we were needing to get started with a clean, and a lot of times people will stay longer than they need, just because they don't know if they're allowed to leave. Guests are weird sometimes. Me, excuse me sir, do you need anything else? Man, yes, I would like to speak to my server as a gut reaction. My immediate thought when someone asks for their server is oh shit, but I reply that I will be right back with their server. I find them, give them the gist of the story so far, and send them in. Of course, I stand back and try to hear what happens like the curious little shit I am. Server, what can I do for you? Man, $EXTENDING $50. First off, this is for you. I just wanted you to know that I've been in the server industry for X years. Can't remember how many years he said, and I've always loved the idea of having a meal during a movie, but have never been able to come to one of these before. I just wanted to say thank you for the great service on my first visit. The server thanks them, as one of our managers who saw a server talking to a lone guest for a while, assuming the worst, walks on up. The man and my manager talk on his way out of the building and the server nearly collapses from relief of not getting yelled at. And you're fired. I got a sweet job across town. Bar supervisor at a high volume place. I got my fiance hired there too. After 2 months we made arrangements to move closer to work. We ended our rolled lease early and paid the fee because who cares? We are rolling in it. We pack up our things, leaving our personal bar tools at work overnight. Boss wishes us luck packing. Thank you for granting us the days off, boss. Today, the day before we move to the other side of the city, MGMT fires me over a guest complaint. They know full well of the comedic timing. They are already understaffed, but it's not their decision. They're sorry. I keep it together, thank them for the opportunity, leave quietly. I stagger to the car, blinking back tears, while shrieking third graders leap off a bus nearby. I'm suddenly $5k in debt over this job. I have not been in debt once in my life, nor have I been jobless. Fiance is livid, but I'm begging him not to quit, not until we are stable, not until he's got something else lined up. I'm still processing. My coworkers were my family, and I was this. My world is crashing, and I cannot feel a thing. Our new place is fucking gorgeous. I'm jealous that fiance gets to work tomorrow. I need help. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for reading. I truly don't know what to do. No, I'd rather not stay until midnight to work that party. The place I work at has 2 floors. During our off season, which typically ends around Labor Day, we only open the floor on weekends for football. Why we have this, I have no idea. We are not the type of place that you would think has football. Last Saturday, I was scheduled as a mid downstairs. I come in at 11 to open and leave, in theory, at 7 or 8. It was dead the entire day. I had 5 or 6 tables before my manager got the hint that we didn't want to stay. 4 hours and $35 later. We had a party scheduled at 10 that night, a bachelorette party. Typically in the off season, the whole store is closed by 9. Manager asks if I can stay to help with the party and even assures me that I would be cut soon and given a nice, long break. I said no, so I went home. I was talking to a coworker who decided to stay the next day, and she told me that manager kept the floor open the entire time and never made cuts. Mind you, both of them came in right after me at 11 or 11:30 working straight through. The party came in at 10 from another part of town known for its nightlife. They were already drunk and had already eaten, so they basically didn't order anything. The only plus to this was the auto-grad at 21%, which we never do. But it probably wasn't that much anyway. Really glad I went home. You didn't make a reservation for Valentine's Day. Tough. I worked at a Thai/Vietnamese restaurant that was small but pretty popular with the locals, so any holidays, events or festivals would have the whole place packed. My first big holiday I had worked was Valentine's Day. I was hired literally that week. So the whole week prior to Valentine's Day, it was on a Saturday, lots of people had been calling in to reserve tables for either 2 tops or more. Eventually, the notebook where we write down reservations had 2 pages full for just one day. I knew I had to work that night, so I knew I was in for a shit show. Saturday comes around, and as soon as we open for dinner, hours were 11:30 am to 3 pm and 5 pm to 9 pm. People come rolling in. There were also people already waiting outside for us to open up. 2 go orders were coming in pretty hot that night too, so our hostess was crazy busy between answering the phone, bagging orders, clearing tables and seating customers. By 6:30, the place was packed, and we had a large group of people waiting to be seated. Most of them did not have reservations. Eventually, the owners told us that we are no longer taking 2 go orders. Hostess was to help servers with tables, and people with no reservations can't be seated. Those people were not happy. Some even went all Karen on us, but us servers and the hostess were relieved. So, lesson of the day, make reservations if you're going out on a holiday, and don't be douches by expecting a table right away. Guy and Amp, his son come in 2 to 15 minutes before closing to sit for an hour every day for almost 4 years. This is going to be a long one, but I'm excited to tell this story to people who can feel my pain. TLDR at the bottom. About 2 years ago I worked at a small pretty slow restaurant. Wasn't uncommon to only sell $500 on an 8-hour shift, which meant there was a lot of downtime, so closing duties were pretty much always kept up with, and I was able to leave work the moment I was scheduled to be done. The place closed every day between 3-4:30 for dinner prep, cooks hanging out and Amp eating, but regardless of what the cooks did, the restaurant had usually always been empty for around an hour before we closed, so 3 was the time that the day server was meant to finish 5/7 days of the week. This guy P. M50S and his son J. M14 would come in anywhere between 2 to 15 minutes before closing to sit down and eat. Some days they would call 5 minutes before close, but not arrive until 10 minutes after we closed. Some days they would even show up 30 minutes before, but they would still stay up to 45 minutes after we closed. Some days you thought you were going to get off easy, and they would come rolling in, literally rolling. 14 years old, always wore Heelys, literally 2 minutes before closing. If they called, say 5 minutes before closing to Preda, and you didn't answer, they would call and call until you finally did, or until they arrived and started pounding on the door until you let them in. One time we closed early because it was dead and we were preparing for a function that evening, and he pounded on the door until a staff member opened the door, pushed past them, and started screaming at the owner. There were days when I had been there since 6 am and wanted nothing more than to go home, and the moment they walked through the door I would just start to cry. I would nicely ask them if they could get takeout instead of dining in, but the answer was usually no. The most frustrating part is that once their food would come out, they would let it sit in front of them for roughly 15 minutes before they would even touch it. They would just sit there and read books to each other or draw until they decided they had wasted enough of my time, I guess. They would also order the exact same thing every single day. Who can eat the same meal every day? This was going on roughly a year before I started, the 9 months I was there, and is still going on 2 years later. I have talked to servers from other restaurants in town and they have had the same experience, so clearly this guy gets off on being a dick to servers. Now obviously the two obvious questions are, why didn't I refuse them service? 1. The owner strongly valued repeat business. He was a very cheap man and all that mattered to him was that extra $30 he was getting off of them, never mind having to pay both the server and amp, cook for extra time. 2. The owner was a very timid man and hated any sort of confrontation, so he would rather let this dude be a dick to us than deal with the situation. 3. The last server who did that ended up in a screaming match with him and got absolutely no backup from the owner. Did he tip well? He did. We usually got a soiled 18-20% out of him. Until of course we all stopped caring about giving him proper service. I'm a hard worker and will bite my tongue for the sake of doing my job and getting a tip, but an extra $6 a day is not worth me letting some old dude think it's chill to purposely waste my time every day. TLDR, dude, M50s, and son, M14, come in every single day, 2 to 15 minutes, before closing for almost 4 years. They order the exact same thing every day, and sit for almost an hour, despite staff asking them to please do take it, or come in at a reasonable time. Guy gets angry if you try to decline him service, and has no problem screaming at the servers. Owner is a weenie and doesn't back any of us up as he values the $5 profit has making over happiness of staff. Sorry, we are closing now, but I drove 35 minutes. Okay, we are closing. The lights are off, the restaurant is obviously closed. Yet have to answer, aren't you closing in 11 minutes? Yeah, we stopped taking orders 15 minutes before closing. And then he walked out, hopefully with a lesson. Learn to never drive 35 minutes hoping that you make it inside a place when they are just about to close. Not even my damn table. Basically just ranting about tonight. So a table stops me and asks me where their server is. I go up to the host stand and ask. The server whose section they sat had gone home, personal issues, about an hour earlier, but they never closed her section and were still seating it. My section is on the other side of the restaurant, and when I ask the girl whose section is right next to their table, she refuses to take it. I finally said fuck it, and picked it up. I apologized to them for the inconvenience, we exchanged pleasantries, and everything seemed fine. When it's time for dessert, they told me what they wanted, but also asked for the check at the same time. Of course, old dude's card was declined. I tried it again at another posse, but it was still declined. I asked my manager to take care of the situation, because I wasn't entirely sure what to do. They apparently went on a rant about how rude I was, then my manager comped a few things off of their check and the girl had to pay with cash. I went to pick up the book, and they left a penny. And apparently laughed about it when they were walking outside. I understand people being cheap as fuck assholes, but leaving a penny just to be petty is completely unacceptable because your card declined. From classy to trashy. I work at an upscale restaurant, our wine list goes up to 1500, and generally people behave. The other night, that get a tip-top, mid-40s couple, and they're great seemingly low-key. I walk them down the menu, explain the wine and cocktails lists for hen walk away. I come back, and the man orders a $200 bottle of wine. I proceed to go to the cellar and grab the bottle and pour the taste. Gentleman quickly says it's perfect, and I pour a half glass each, before walking away to give time for them to go over the menu. After coming back they liked a couple starter descriptions I had get them. Food comes out, and they want time to eat them before ordering. No big deal, enjoy yourself. 10 minutes later they're halfway through. I had already 2-bite checked that everything was up to their liking. I take their order. Entrees arrive and everything is perfect when I check back. I proceed to pour another half glass each and walk away. Halfway through their entrees my managers are starting to talk about some woman just going off on some man, as I do another pass B, silent service, it's my couple. Apparently these well-dressed older couple is breaking up, and the woman is not taking it well. She proceeds to yell periodically, loud enough to hear 100 feet away, "You're fucking pathetic, and can't fucking commit. How fucking dare you do this to me?" I decide to steer clear of them for a while. Besides boxing half her food, the gentleman did crush all of his. Never before have I avoided a table more than this one. During this tridge of insults both tables next to them are sat. The looks they gave me during her outbursts made us all wince together. After an hour the lady finally asks for the check, the gentleman quickly pays 300 tab and tips 20%. In all fairness to the man who couldn't commit, he never raised his voice, but rather calmly tried to bring her down the entire time. He for all appearances sake seemed like a perfect gentleman trying to end a relationship civilly, but again I wasn't privy to the conversation. I ended up buying desserts for the 2 other tables that got to witness these shenanigans to leave a good taste in their mouth. Both loved it, and though at first mortified, saw the humor in the situation as people watching. Just felt I finally had something to share to the community besides the occasional comment. I feel for the woman, but she made a boring night with unforgettable. It's not always about the tips. I've seen a lot of debate on this sub about how servers are only in it for the tips and too entitled, despite the fact that it's our job, and sometimes passion, to serve people. I have an interesting, or mixed view of this. I got my serving start in a state where the minimum wage was $12. So yeah, I liked my tips, but I was paid a fair hourly, so I did my fucking job. Now I live in a state where I get paid $2 an hour. When people stiff me, I feel like I have been unfairly tricked into being their slave for 1/2 hour, and do not take kindly to it. That table walks in again, and I will not fucking serve them. They can sit in another section or they can leave. I'm not a slave. But I digress. This post is actually wholesome. I have a strange love for serving kids tables, even though they usually don't tip, and I know that ahead of time. I love getting that 3 top of jiggly 16-year-old stoner boys getting waffles at 8 p.m. The ones too scared to look me in the eye that order chocolate milk and burst out laughing when I walk away. They don't tip. I love the 3 kids from the elementary school down the street that come in and all split a sundae each Friday, even though they make a huge mess and leave me $0.60 each time. I love the 12 top of 15-year-old girls that all want hot cocoa and pancakes and separate checks that are all weirdly attentive when I speak and like to hand me my $1 tip separately from the other money because they haven't realized keep the change is a thing yet. So no, I'm not completely a whore for tips. I do enjoy serving people who deserve good service. What I hate is the entitled fat bitch who stiffed me last week because she tried to order off the dinner menu during breakfast, and I told her politely that we were not serving that yet. She wouldn't listen to the explanation that just because she bullied some other server into giving her fat fucking meatloaf some other day at 9 AM doesn't mean we can do it on Sunday during the brunch rush. What I hate is the guy that gets out of his seat while I have my arms full of food for another table to tell me his coffee is empty, even though I just filled his cup less than 5 minutes ago. What I hate is the fact that I'm still standing here being blocked by him as the plates sear themselves into my flesh while he rants that if I want to tip his cup had better be full at all times. IDK what my point is, I'm just ranting now. I guess my point was I'll put up with a shit tip from a kid or ya table because they honestly brighten my day and make me smile. So even jaded servers like me aren't completely lost to hope. Anyone been through a landrise takeover? Hi fellow servers. Using my throwaway because Tillman scares me. Our restaurant group got purchased by Landrise this month and I've heard nothing but horror stories. Can anyone provide insight? We've heard stories that they cut budgets and penny pinch guests and staff. Is it as bad as it sounds? What should I expect? For reference, we are a fine dining steakhouse similar to Mastro's with awesome benefits, but a really poor labor and maintenance structure. coworker goes out of his way to save the guest money. Instead gets stiffed. So my coworker, who's also one of our strongest servers, is met with an interesting request. A guest wanted to substitute a $0.99 item for a $7.99 item and was fine with any upcharge. We worked it out and rang in a $7 upcharge to spare the guest having to pay full price for the item he wanted. When the check comes by, the guest sees the $7 upcharge and gets confused about why it's there. My coworker tries explaining, but this guy's hung up on how unclear the upcharge is and refuses to understand that we've saved him money. In the end, he stiffs my coworker and leaves a note saying I did not appreciate the customer service. So, if I were to learn anything from this guy, it's that it's bad customer service to minimize costs while delivering the request. You can't fix stupid. Those who have served big name celebrities, for instance Beyonce, Justin Bieber, Oprah, who did you like or hate serving the most? Did your overall opinion of them change after serving them? This thread was inspired by a post made on r/server life about Kyle Massey from That's So Raven being an immature piece of shit to his server. Imagine being a grown man in your 20s and drawing dick pics on a tip receipt like a 10-year-old. To the table who remembered our conversation 3 years later in another restaurant. 3 years ago I had my first serving job. It was not my favorite place, always understaffed, but I definitely refined and grew my work ethic there, no doubt about it. I had to wear a tie at this said first serving job of mine, and I did a really intricate knot, sort of a knockoff of the Eldridge. Last night and 3 years later at my new serving job, brand new restaurant, I had a table that my coworker was serving, but when I dropped off some drinks they appeared to be probing me with "You look familiar, and where did you work?" I agree they also have a familiar face, and I asked them if they went to my said first restaurant job. Immediately one of the four bursts out all the details of my tie I used to wear and how she remembered the conversations we had because of it. Then the rest of the table joins in with remembrance as well. I commend them on the memory and that I honestly appreciated it because I really did that, so people would feel invited to small talk. The great and positive conversations with tables are the only reason I enjoy serving, outside of the fast pace and often hard work. Who enjoys that though/s? For anyone who does that extra little step, no matter what it is, it pays off if you're doing it for the right reasons. Even if it takes 3 years for someone to make it seem significant by remembering details of a one-time conversation, it already is just because of the small impact, like someone asking about how you did it or why originally. Thank you kind for Top Table for reminding me in such an enthusiastic way why I always come through that door leaving negativity and personal dramas behind 99.9% of the time. Nobody is perfect, haha, and attempting to go the extra mile. TLDR. This table that wasn't mine, but a co-worker's remembered my tie from an old job 3 years ago and made a deal about it. I loved doing that tie knot, so it really made my month if not year. Keep on keeping on with those special touches, fellow servers, that you put on tables and atmosphere. Almost 2020. So, how to make your bakery employees' life a bit more comfortable, or sad on things that you might not want to do. So, here's a sad on things you should or shouldn't do when going to a bakery. 1. Order a ton of bread rolls without placing an order. So, this happened a while ago. It was about 8 AM in the morning. This lady walks in and orders about 50 bread rolls. The only thing was, we don't have that many sitting in the counter. If you are gonna order 20 rolls or more, please call in before. Especially in the morning, they sell like crazy. And if you basically buy our whole stock, it makes all life very hard because we A. have to bake new ones and B. have to tell every customer we are out, which forces them to choose another option, costing us valuable time. If you pre-order your bread rolls, we can make them ahead of time and reserve them for you, which makes it easier for all of us. And amp #X200B. 2. Not bringing enough cash. While I don't know how the situation is where you live, I can say that we don't accept credit or debit cards. So if you order 50 bread rolls without a pre-order and then don't even have cash, It's costing us so much time because at 8 am there's like 20 people in line wanting to buy their breakfast, and you having to run back into some other shop or going to the bank just increases the waiting time. But even worse is, and amp, #x200b. 3 ***bring too much cash. If you are gonna order a croissant in the morning, please make sure you have smaller banknotes. If you pay with 50 for a €1,10 croissant, we have to basically empty our entire register to give you change, leaving us with no change for other customers and amp, #x200b. 4 Please choose before you order. This one is especially true at times where the bakery is very full. If you are standing in line, you should choose what I want. Because if it's your turn and you take 10 minimums just choosing one bread roll, you're slowing down the traffic immensely. This doesn't even annoy me as much as it annoys other customers and amp, #x200b. 5 ****. Be polite. I shouldn't have to include this, but if you want to buy some raisin bread, just don't stand 10 feet away from the counter, leaned against a pillar and scream, "Raisin bread," and then complain why the customer service might be bit sloppy. Otherwise we might just send you to the back of the line and amp, #x200b. Please, this shouldn't be understood as a list of guidelines or rules you have to follow. But if you want to make our life, and yours, that much more easier, please respect some of these points. Because it really does make our job that much more bearable. Was having a bad night before the medical emergency. Had a fucking ride of a shift tonight. On mobile, apologies for poor formatting etc. We have been wildly short-staffed in the kitchen and in the FO for the last 2 months. Management has been trying to fix it, but the hires haven't worked out, so we have been capping reservations quite low each night. Tonight the head chef / man who mans the grill at this steakhouse wasn't in for reasons no one bothered to explain to me, and there was no extra line cook called in, and one of the 4 people who were in the kitchen is a new hire who is a slow idiot too. But we get a fuck ton of walk-ins. BC, the reservations have been capped really low. All of the servers want money and the kitchen signs off on it. They could have said no. They didn't. 3. As they start getting that food out, we get slammed with takeout orders. Kitchen starts to visibly break down. Phone is ringing off the hook with massive irritating takeout orders. We have 3/4 of the seats in the restaurant sat on a night where we were only supposed to use half, and probably not all at the same time. 4. During this double slamming of walk-ins and takeouts, an elderly regular who is a long-time family friend of the women filling in on the grill collapses and I have to call an ambulance. The cook, who knows her fucking, leaps out of the kitchen to help her and administers actually quite good first responder basic first aid stuff, cataloging responsiveness etc. The remaining 3 line cooks, one of whom is so stupid and new and slow, do their best, and it is shit. The new guy is on fire, and for a solid 20 minutes anything with fries or chicken fingers is going out without the fries, and then I have to stand there glaring at the back of his head until he has my 3 sides of fries each in a teetering pile on tiny side plates that are awful to carry. 4. A table seated near where this woman has collapsed. Call me over 3 times about them moving tables. An ambulance is literally pulling up and someone just may have been seriously hurt and they're like, "This isn't going to work for us." I said yes the first time. I just needed time to clear the damn thing. They ended up camping out in one of the best booths for an hour after they finished eating and tipped $2 on a $75 bill. 5. During all of this, one of the 2 dishwashers in begins vomiting continuously, literally does not stop puking for 20 minutes, and has to go home, leaving one teenage stoner to finish all the closing dishes of the busiest non-banquet / special event night we have had in 2 months. I really did not need the hideous adrenaline rush of hearing the sound of that woman falling and then trying to calm her husband enough that he could tell me what happened so I could relay it to the 911 dispatcher. And then to just go back to serving steaks. Asking people how they're doing tonight and saying "I'm doing great, thanks for asking," when a woman was just unresponsive on the floor for 3 minutes. My hands were shaking for a while after I almost lost a plate. Now I'm home and too wired to sleep.